Hello there, this is the voice of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, a series of 12 remarkable conversations that I'm having with male soul stewards from all over the world, these extraordinary men who are transmitting unconditional love, empathy, and vast waves of spiritual intelligence, encouraging us, inspiring us, enthusing us into living a new level of living, and thereby creating a brave new world. Good evening, everybody. Here is the wonderful John Burgos. As usual, just purely for officialdom's sake, I think you probably all know John, and certainly know John, but I really want to just honor him from a leadership point of view, because he is a very formidable gentleman within the Mind, Body, Spirit community globally. So John is an activist, a mystic, and a futurist who's created an immensely highly successful show called Beyond the Ordinary Show in order to enrich and inspire the lives of people within the global spiritual community. Don't look at it now, wait until later. I'll introduce it at the end. John's other fascinating project is known as Living in the Extraordinary, which leads people through a regeneration and resurrection process. John is widely recognized as one of the most outstanding adepts and spiritual guides of the human potential movement, bringing light to the co-creative power of the awakened and therefore within the collective body of global consciousness. So John, welcome. It's wonderful to see you again.
It's so good to be with you always. I just love these conversations that evolve with you every single time.
It feels like we're sort of resting in canoes on this wonderful river of life. Look, with paddles in hand, maybe a few leaves in headdresses, and having unusual conversations beyond the ordinary, and therefore really drawing the whole of the spiritual dimension deep into these extraordinary bodies that we have. So John, you have this unique position of being able to be in conversation with many extraordinary healers that come to your platform, that come to Beyond the Ordinary Show. And I just wondered if you'd picked up any particular trends or observed any trends that are coming forth at this time.
The trends are actually quite interesting, and it's more of a recognizing of what we're all seeing as the timelines that seem to be evolving and the biggest potentials that are going to hit up to December and even through the beginning of next year. So most of the healers that I've talked to on the show, they're collaborating. It's this wave that we're in right now, this awakening of consciousness. Even though it seems like we've gone to sleep for a little bit, we haven't. There's so much going on underneath the surface. There's so much that's rooting in the most positive way, even though it's not portrayed that way on the surface. So you have the waves crashing on top of the ocean, but underneath there's something that's gestating, and it's asking us to go deep within. And we're settling in. We're going to places that we haven't been before in our own consciousness, in our own being, in our own embodiment. And from that, there's a wave that's going to expand, and it's going to form another wave of consciousness. And I get a timing consistently by the end of December. There's going to be a shift. There's going to be a letting loose and more of a forward direction instead of so much of the inward and the uncertainty, which is necessary right now. So anywhere where anybody is feeling uneasy because we don't know where we're going, it's actually beautiful. Because if we don't know where we're going, that means we can't recreate the mistakes of the past. We're saying no to that. Not that they were mistakes necessarily, they were necessary to get us here. But we've learned, we get to amplify, we get to evolve, not only ourselves, but the situations in our life. And that is bringing forward a new way of being, of living individually and collectively.
Mm. So bearing in mind your intuitive facilitation, what do you feel that new way of being will be I mean, that's a really challenging question, but
It is, but it isn't, because what I feel is that there's an integration and this divine communion between our masculine and feminine aspects. And in that, we're going to be in more action taken mode as the masculine, but there's going to be a deep sense of empathy that's awakening within us and compassion that actually fuels the movement forward. So the way that we create and collaborate with others is going to be really integrated. And that wave is really going to demonstrate just how much of that union, that communion has taken place. And we're going to be really surprised at the innovation that starts to evolve after the beginning of the year.
fascinating. And in fact, that tunes in with a little bit of reconnoitering that I've been engaged in pre coming to meet you this evening about what are the major astrological propositions that are being put forward. You know, in times of flux, I generally speaking am buoyant with the surfing nature of what flux is all about. But after all, I am a Taurus boy, and so therefore I love to get my feet on the ground as securely as possible. But at the moment, that's very difficult because everything, you know, I'm very secure in my being, but it's very difficult on the outside because everything is changing. And there's a very strong possibility, as I discovered this morning from a government official that is one of my go-to people, that the United Kingdom is going to move into a forced lockdown for 2 months or 3 months during the Christmas period. Anyway, so automatically one's own personal plans become upset, particularly in terms of the way that we like to organize workshops and seminars and so forth and so forth. So I was tuning into the astrology because it seems to me that these extraordinary solid forms, you know, the great spheres are having an extraordinary effect on our lives at the moment. And apropos what you've just shared with us, there is this great shift in December, particularly around December the 21st, which of course is the winter solstice, when I was hoping to be in Egypt, but it looks more and more and more that I won't be in Egypt. For the dawn ceremony of the winter solstice, which is just so beautiful when the sun rises at a particular angle and burns into the Holy of Holies. It's the only day of the year when the sun rises at that point. And most of the predictions are, the astrological predictions are that there will be a great meeting point between the male and the female, particularly as more and more women are charged to take over positions of responsibility. And so I did a little bit of research just to see, well, how many women are there as head of state at this time? And of course, there are the obvious ones that come to mind with Jacinta Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and of course, Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor. And then Denmark has a Prime Minister in the form of Mette Frederiksen, and then Finland's Sanna Marin. She's only 34 years of age as Prime Minister. There's a prime minister, a female prime minister in Ethiopia, in Estonia, in Gabon, in Greece, and in Norway. So, you know, this is huge. This has happened over the last 2 or 3 years, this great movement. And it seems that as we move into 2021, that we're going to also see many women stepping forward and being given positions of responsibility that are absolutely fast, therefore creating the interweaving that you were talking about, which of course we've been very aware of for some time, for many years in fact. It's just that many of our brothers and sisters who aren't necessarily called consciously to spirit are having a difficult time with it because they're resting on the paradigms of old establishment. What do you feel as we move into the brave new world? Are there any systems, our governing systems that is, that you're going to miss?
Well, I want to get back into the conversation about all these feminine leaders, the feminine energies that are leading up, because this is fascinating. You've heard it said, I think it was the Dalai Lama said that it was the woman that was going to save the world, right?
Yeah, he said that the next chapter of history would be written by the women and the girls.
Yes, thank you. And I actually want to take it a little bit deeper and dissect that a little bit. Because I think the next chapter of history is actually going to be written by the empaths. And it's the feminine aspect that brings that empathic ability within the men and the women that are coming through. So there's no surprise that this way of governing, that this way of leading is coming to arise, and it's that type of leadership is going to allow the masculine in men and women to notice something created differently, to notice something that's actually created and is aligned with their nervous system, as opposed to something that's been imposed because of societal norms of what a man or women have to be and how we create. And so by awakening that empath within all of us, there's certain things that we just will not be able to engage in anymore. Consuming, the degradation of the planet, the abuse of other human beings through human rights, when that compassion arises in you, you're not going to be complacent or complicit in the ways that we have been, because we've been so distracted with consumerism and with survivalism that is falling by the side. This time of reset that we've had over the last 4 months had allowed us to go deeper in, take a look from a different vantage point, feel the wave of emotions that we've been so out of tune with for so long, and to come back in and allow it to take us over. And it's felt dark, it's felt in despair, it felt lonely, and it felt hopeful. The going in that time has allowed us to become more intimate with our true organic nature. And from that, this rising of sensitivity, of collective consciousness for the betterment of everybody, not for the individual, but for everybody. What's good for me has to be good for you, or else it's not good for me anymore. It doesn't fulfill me in the way that it used to. And so the age of consumerism is dying. So it's so interesting that the UK may go on lockdown during the Christmas holidays. What's that doing to reset our patterns, our habits, in the way that we're used to interacting during these holy holidays? What's going to evolve? How are we going to get back into the truth of why we're celebrating this time together, other than just some type of physical exchange to allow us to feel temporarily good and get that dopamine hit and then go back into our normal lives? And so the rise of the empath, that is what's taking shape right now. And from that space of emoting, of being and creating, we create a different society. And so what's happening in the government forces is that there's going to be a shift. I believe that for the most part, and I don't know how long this is going to take, but I believe that we're going to go further and further away from centralized governing into localized, and give more power to the local. And from that, create abundance, create success within that. And then that success gets to be shared outwardly. It's been inverted the other way around, and it's disassociated from the needs of the individual for the profit of the greater good, if you will, but at the expense of the intimacy of what's happening at the local state, of what's happening within us, of the truth of what's arising in our soul. So as we reverse that, there'll be more of an attunement. There'll be more of a say-so. Your voice will count more than it ever has before when we become localized. And when that happens, the shifts in consciousness get to expand as well. And then we start creating solutions from the localized, from the micro level, going out, instead of trying to create a solution from the macro going in. We know how impossible and overwhelming that can seem. And so when we start turning it around, we start leading with that empathy, with that compassion, with the clarity that comes from that feeling tone, when the heart is leading the mind rather than the mind trying to process what the heart is saying and overriding it, we change the world. So I believe it's the empath that's going to change the world.
I hear you, John, absolutely. And I completely concur. I'm calling this period the revolution of the empaths. Because I feel that that's an interesting balance of ideas or properties, you know, that you mean empaths could be revolutionary? Well, why not, you know? Because revolution suggests zeal and fervor and passion and the possibility of violence. But at the same time, if it's the revolution of the empaths, then we move into non-violent, peaceful protest as we begin. And so reviewing, I mean, there presumably are a series of dynamics that we can perhaps identify for our listeners and viewers. The dynamics being, how do we enter into the use of, we've already reached a rationale about the fact that we can claim ourselves to be empaths because we feel a level of sensitivity, a level of vulnerability, a level of inclusivity about the sentience of life. And so when others are going through crises, we automatically feel compassionately associated with them, involved maybe if we can help, or at least there we are being present to the possibility of how we can communicate with them. If it's not overt, then certainly through covert mechanisms, by praying and by being at one with their predicament. So in order to strengthen the empathic nature of our being, are there any particular prerequisites that you feel are significant?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, we can't be afraid of our empathic nature. And so, the first stage of empathy, if you will, it's feeling all of these things that are coming up and not knowing why and feeling like you're victimized by your environment, whether it's TV or a group of people or the family that you're surrounded with, and you just can only take so much. And it's allowing, and even social media and what we're consuming in different ways, we've been so entrained to take the first emotional hit as our truth and then run with it, that it's taken us off kilter. We're actually stewing in somebody else's soup instead of being with our truth. And so what I'd suggest, and I highly recommend actually, is that whenever something does arise, that we just pause and just allow it to turn, allow it to rise and attune all the way through you. And as that attunes, your truth comes in instead of staying in that parasympathetic response that we know we're going to get. So we know that we're going to get that response from the beginning. So with that awareness, we're already empowered that we don't have to be swayed by it. We can pause. We can become aware, and then we can decide. A 30-second pause works wonders. A day pause creates a whole different shift. But the immediate reaction and functioning from that initial stimulus, it doesn't serve us anymore. We've been entrained to consume our behavior on how to be workers, even our spirituality, about how we receive and open up and let things go and all that, based on initial emotional and physical response. So now
it's actually about reaction, isn't it?
It is.
That we've been engendered and encouraged to react through largely through the doing mechanism, and the way that we become dazzled by all the stimuli. I think, is that what you're referring to in terms of commercialism? That we react to it, and actually what you're recommending, and I absolutely, my whole statement being detach, feel stillness and observe.
Yeah.
Rather than immediately reacting. And then, of course, what we need to do is prime ourselves through stillness by making sure that we have a meditative stillness, being present in nature, being present with our lives, just for 20-25 minutes every day, hopefully twice a day. And then we start to prime our neural pathways so that we're not necessarily reacting so forcefully.
Yeah, and even if you don't go out and meditate, just noticing, just being with what comes through is like, oh, I just had this reaction. I just went off on the social media post emotionally and left my body and entered somebody else's reality to start some type of war that isn't really mine. And it's a psychological and psychic war that we're creating. So also it's important that we're aware that anything that we think is an energy output into the world, into the cosmos. We forget what creators that we are. In the subtle realms, we are so powerful. So anytime we have a condemning thought for someone else, we're creating that in the field. And so let's become conscious of what we're creating and pausing and kind of take it back and reattune to the world that we want to create for ourselves and for humanity. we're in a time of taking responsibility for what's being emanated through us. This pause and this path through empathy is a guidepost towards that. But we're maturing spiritually and on a human level in ways that we haven't before. And we need to be aware of the implications of our actions, our reactions, and how we choose to generate our next creation.
Yeah, yeah. And there are huge currents of force that are taking shape in our world at this time, both in terms of the stratosphere or the atmosphere, or indeed the immediate vicinity of the planets above us and around us. And at the same time, there is stuff going on within the Gaia that we need to be aware of. And so that when we're picking up these currents of force that appear to be disturbing, or we may monitor that our mood has radically changed from one moment to the next, or from 1 hour to the next, or from one day to the next, that what I'm reminding people constantly is that, okay, detach, feel stillness, and observe again, that because your mood has shifted isn't necessarily because you are going through some fundamental process. It's because you're a sentient being sensing what is actually going on within the heavens or going on within the Gaia. And this is how remarkable the interconnectivity of co-creation is. So how do you want to move with it? Do you want to move with the negative by increasing more negative? Or do you wish to actually be with the resolving, healing, transformative forces by really breathing into that moment as much love as possible to change circumstances? Yeah. And any other suggestions that come to your mind?
Well, I love that you mentioned that, because immediately I went into that part of me that sometimes just wants to be pissed off for a while and kind of wants to hold on, and it's like dig my heels, and it's like, no, that's I'm going to stand up for that, or I'm just going to hold this so tight. And it's eventually we have to start laughing at those parts of ourselves, because it's like, why it's like, okay, that needed to come through, and whatever it was, and we don't have to think about it too much. But again, we find ourselves again. So humor, like really allowing to laugh at ourselves, is like, God, I can't believe I got caught up, or I went down that trail. And humor and compassion. And if we can practice humor and compassion for ourselves, then we can practice it for others as well. We can see beyond the initial reaction and know that one thing does not define someone else. And we can invite a lightness of being that allows these boundaries, these shields to drop off for the truth to be revealed. And Stewart, I think at core, we all want the same thing. We all want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We want to be at peace. We want to feel like we've been taken care of. And there's different, as many different people as there are in the world, there's that many different paths on how to get there. So how do we have the eyes and hold the eyes of compassion for someone else without taking ourselves down their road, because it's not for us? And it's that sense of detachment, but holding our vibration as best as we can in the moment, in the highest, that allows different shifts to start to take place. But it's a dance, and we're all doing this dance. And again, compassion and humor are just the biggest tools, or some of the biggest tools that are available to us.
Yeah, yeah. And there are a number of challenging things going on in people's lives. I mean, there are severe peaks taking place as we look into the possibility of how the wave of Aquarius coming into our midst brings karma from our past, both individually and collectively. And that, one of the things that I've discovered, or I'm engaging people in, when they review other people's strife, rather than pouring into the drama of what the strife is, of again, detach, feel stillness, observing, and being in honor of the wonderment of what the human psyche is actually all about, from the position of, wow, now that was interesting. What does that mean? In all the varying situations that we can go into, because our bodies can get very messy, as we know, when they start to need healing or they're wounded, of why someone would choose that from a karmic point of view, from a soul point of view, rather than getting caught up in the drama.
Right. Yeah. And that wave, it's again, I love the way that you said that, because we can witness it. And sometimes the biggest gift that we can give as empathic beings is just witnessing someone else without trying to fix them and without judging them. But just, hey, I understand it's hurting. I understand that you're scared. I understand that this is, or I hear you. Not even understand, I hear. This is what I hear you telling me. And just repeating that back to someone without a judgment one way or the other, without needing to fix them, without needing to completely immerse yourself in their situation. It's a powerful place to hold.
I've had lots of stories coming to me, either through dear clients or dear ones, or through friends, you know, and really dramatic stories. And I noticed that my first response as an empath is, ouch, wow, that hurts. That really, oh my God, I'm with you. I'm really with you. That hurts. Okay. So let's just breathe deeply and realize that this shall pass, because all conditions are temporary. And then what's your best solution?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I love the ouch that we get, right? Because if there's an ouch that we're receiving, there's something that's healing inside of us that's actually generating a wisdom and a power that's been dormant within us. So as we take those in, it's like, oh, wait, that just kind of stimulated something in my system that is awakening that wasn't there before. So if it stimulates more compassion, because you can feel it from their point of view, awesome. If it stimulates a wisdom, if it stimulates an opportunity of, if you will, a wormhole on how to evolve and, you know, so much quicker because of that stimulus, it's again, you said the word perfectly earlier, and then I hold on to it. It's the state of wonder that we're in. And we don't have to know, but we can be aware that we're equipped. And with that trust, with that knowing that we're equipped for this ride, for this journey, then a lot of the propaganda that's been told to us and how we are going to suffer through this doesn't have to be as live as it is right now.
As you weave through this richness of energy, are you experiencing magic come?
Oh my God, yes. There's so much synchronicity that is showing up. The cat isn't completely out of the bag. I've been sharing it with a lot of different people. And I also want to share an experience that I had during a meditation. But some of the magic that's coming up, Stuart, and this is exciting for all of us. I get that for me, it's a peak in my career and what I want to do and how do I get onto the world. But every time I land, it's like, wow, this is for me, but this is for us. And so I've held for the longest time that I wanted to translate our vernacular, what we use on these type of platforms, the words, the feeling tones, how we invite people into deep dialogue, that I wanted to make it more accessible somehow, that it's really, that we have to get to a point that it's translatable to more people. So they don't feel like they're outside of it, or they don't think it's weird or something that is imposed upon them and sets aside their own belief systems. And the opportunity has come up with major media for me to present and talk about these concepts and invite a perspective that doesn't polarize and cause war within the viewers, but it actually allows the sender to come in. So there's major media opportunity, and the media is excited because there's someone who's having a conversation that's unifying people, because they know that the guy with the suit and the tie that's pushing people in a particular direction according to their agenda is tired now. The audiences they're not caught up in the conversation anymore. They're looking for something else. So the major media networks, talking millions of viewers at a time, they're saying, no, there's a different conversation that needs to be had, and they're inviting me in, and that's starting to take form. So the synchronicity of that during this time and this reset tells me that there's a big shift in consciousness. I've been feeling this for years. It's like, I wonder when it's going to happen. I wonder when it's going to happen. I wonder what's going to happen. And it's time. And this wave of consciousness. Yeah.
I feel its poignancy, John. This is really exciting. Well done. You've manifested this. This is fantastic.
Yes, absolutely.
It's fantastic.
Well, we manifested it.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just applauding and honoring,
Thank
that
you.
very, because you are in this unique position of being able to be the captain of your ship, but at the same time working so co-creatively and so generously by drawing in people from all over the world who have something considerable to say.
Oh yeah.
And of course, and you're this wonderfully articulate intelligence where you're able to observe the world in the multiplicitousness of it all and then have statements about it. And I'm sure on occasion you find yourself just peeking into CNN to see what's going on in the political landscape. And of course, as we know, there's a great war going on, it seems, between CNN and Fox News, and certain politicians favoring one and certain politicians favoring another. So that's really what I was looking at from a macroscopic point of view. And so the very fact that you're coming in and you're having intelligent and sensitive conversations with media people who are able to recognize the same phenomenon and want to shift, I think is absolutely extraordinary.
I'll be on CNN in the next couple of weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's other type of shows that are even
Wow.
yeah,
this is big.
Yeah.
Do you know who you'll be interviewed by?
I don't know yet. Chris Cuomo was one of them.
Wow.
That's a big possibility, right?
I want to see you with Anderson Cooper. I think that will be really exciting.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. Chris is a bit scary.
I like that, actually.
Okay. I've just been in so many situations, mostly with the BBC, where I prepared a fascinating paper that I've been asking here, and that I've arrived, whether it be a TV or a radio, and I've given the paper, and then automatically the interlocutor or the key person, the anchor person, has just torn it to shreds, and I'm left thinking, wow, what was all that about? I was here for conciliation, and now I realize that I'm in the middle of a battle zone. So, yeah, okay, well, that's fascinating because you're getting right into the spearhead, so to speak, in order to bring magic, to bring love into the very tip of the poison spear. You're bringing magic in. How fantastic! Best of luck.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's the universe is guiding it. All I have to do is show up. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been prepared for it, Stewart. So with all of us, wherever we are now, if we just breathe into that, it's like, hold on a second. Wherever situation I find myself in now, whatever is happening currently in my life, if I actually take a deep breath, it's like, I've actually been prepared for this. I didn't just land here. This isn't like this planet that I've all of a sudden got dropped on and I don't know what's happening. I've been prepared. All of my experiences up to now have culminated into who I be. And this leads into this meditation that I had where I actually got taken into the sphere of divinity and the beauty of creation. And in that beauty of creation, I was seeing these colors and all these, and I was like, it was amazing, Stewart. This psychedelic journey that it seemed that I was on. And I describe it like being a 4-year-old in Disneyland in complete awe on acid. It's like everything is like, wow, so beautiful, amazing. It was otherworldly, the beauty that was created from that being present with the creation of God. And I kept going in and out. And the second I brought in any reference, like for a second, a tiny second, the field would collapse. And I left the
When you say bring in reference, meaning?
If I had a thought about the past or how I can make it better or how I can apply it to something that was going on right now, if I started to construct based on past references, that field of wonderment would collapse. And I was like, and everything got really grayish, if you will, to describe a mood for it. And then I'd get back into no reference point to the past and start witnessing the creation again. And it's like, and again, the colors would fly, the magic, the awe, the wonder of the beauty of creation. And for me, that points to our reference points to the past. We can bring forward all of our beautiful experiences, whatever pinnacle moments those were, the daily mundane ones also, and use that as the new foundation of what we're choosing to create next. But let's not try to create from the past anymore, because that's not the world we're living in. We're here to create something new. This is our generation, Stewart. We came here for this, and we're stewarding that, not just for ourselves, but for the future of humanity.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. You know, and what comes to my being is that as we step fully into the holy instant of now, and therefore see the possibility of whatever future may be, but of course we don't really recognize it because we're just purely distilling in the beauty of what we're experiencing in this moment. That how we feel that the past, not from the poor story, the tragic story, the injured story, the poor me story, but purely and simply how we've resolved all of that. And if their stories come, they're merely illustrations of the fact that they were stories. You know, we've earned our stripes. Or another way of putting that, I guess, is that the body may be scarred, but the scar tissue doesn't bleed, it doesn't suppurate, it doesn't weep. We're just simply there so that we know that we have this musculature to rest on and to allow ourselves to become truly huge in that moment. I had a situation on Friday where I was talking to not a large group of people because of COVID, a very socially distanced group of people. And I found it very difficult because they were all so muzzled. All I could see were their eyes. And because their mouths were muzzled, I couldn't actually feel what their responses would be, because it was not the sort of situation. It was being filmed. You know, it was not the situation for me to draw people into conversation, which is what I would normally do, no matter how large the group. And that I found dispelling, because suddenly I lost the timeline. I wasn't totally in the present of the moment. And I'm still going through the process of working out what was that all about, you know, because I know when it can flow and be absolutely extraordinary. I also know when, do you know the acting term to die? When you die on stage, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
die on stage, it means there's no response and nobody really gets what's going on. It's a terrible situation to be in. And I still have the actor's nightmare where I die because I've lost my lines and I haven't acted for 25 years. However, so do you have any particular techniques that you use to anchor yourself in the instinct of the moment so you stay absolutely truthful to the holy instant?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think I call myself back to it when I feel off, and sometimes it takes me a second, and sometimes it takes me days, Stuart. I don't realize that I'm not anchored in. But again, I believe this is part of what we're integrating as well. We're becoming more somatically aware
Mm.
of where we're separating, and it's the more aware we are, the quicker we are to know that it's uncomfortable, that that's not really the way that we would prefer. And so we can bring ourselves back. So whenever that happens, actually, again, I like to do a dance with it and bring attention to it. Just, oh, there I was. Okay, come back. And the more that we just practice having relationship with that separation
Mm.
and recognizing it and not judging, but just, oh, okay. It's like, all right. And here I am. And just again, we're getting into this rhythm. We're getting to know our organic nature so much more than we have before, because we've been so artificially programmed. And so those layers are coming down. We're cleaning our field. We're becoming more attuned to where we go in different places, and we're starting to choose more presence, because in that presence we become powerful creators. And again, we're not at the will of an energy that might be distracting us from what feels in alignment with us.
And what do you engage in to enliven and animate and alert your somatic consciousness?
Oh,
Soma.
there's lots of different things. I love being out in nature. That's always a beautiful one. But even sitting down before an interview and just breathing in and out, listening to music that inspires me. Music is just, oh, it's a gift from the angels, and utilizing music to attune to different emotions that come up are beautiful. Being mindful when I eat, when I chew, when I put myself in this ceremony of being with this nourishment, it's really having reverence for different phases of our day and in relationship with them. And when we start doing that, there's a pace that we start getting into. We slow down just a bit. We start noticing the little ache or twitch from the body that may be coming up, or how the body's trying to give us a stimulus to remember or propel us into a particular action. And it becomes this beautiful tango that we do with ourselves, as opposed to doing this fast whatever dance that we've become so accustomed to. And that tango is beautiful, to be with the messy part of it, but also the grace of it simultaneously. That's what makes it so freaking good to be alive, Stewart.
So you're a tango guy.
It's, in that sense of the word, absolutely, yes.
So yeah, it's fascinating imagery, because automatically we become much more aware of the rhythm of our being. We become aware of our breath, as you were saying. We become aware of our pulse. So coming back to the very intricate but so palpable substance of what our bodies are all about, and how our bodies can serve us as these amazing vehicles to carry our souls forward. And you know, as we move into the end of this year, are there any pragmatic statements that you'd like to offer for how we can increase our somatic adventures?
Well, I think it is imperative that we all do our psychic cleansing, our grounding, and that we go into spiritual hygiene on a daily basis. There's influx, there's lockdowns, the economy is going to be affected. There's going to be all these things that are happening around us that is empathic as we're being led to be. It's important that we get into our center, release what isn't ours, and allow our energetic expression to expand from who we truly are, and not allow those different hooks that are trying to come in, or clean up those hooks on a consistent basis, so that we're not in reaction mode, so our bodies aren't shutting down because it's taking on too much psychically and emotionally from other people. So a daily practice. I think it's probably one of the most important things that you can do, probably for the rest of your life, but from now into the beginning of the year, I cannot tell you the huge difference that's going to make in your daily experience.
I love the phrase psychic hygiene.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And do you have a sensation that you lean into, that you try and find ways of repeating, although each time it's different? Do you have a particular way of stimulating your body? You know, is it to do with being by the sea, or is it to do with the shower, or is it to do with certain foodstuffs that you eat?
Yeah, being in nature is a big one. Breath work is amazing. So pausing and doing different practices. Wim Hof's practice, I think, is wonderful. You guys check out Wim Hof. And there's also a centering in, and what I like to do during this time also, I like to actually get into a practice of reverse engineering my future, like going into the emotional tone of what it is that I want to feel in my creations, not the outcome, not have it set to a particular person or an event or a stimulus that, oh, I've arrived, but what does arriving feel like? And allowing that to well up in me as a creative force, but also a surrender into, I don't have to go get something, I'm becoming something. And there's a big difference between the getting and the becoming. If you all even feel into that, if you get, I've got to do this, there's this anxious driven energy that's happening where we get to, oh, I'm becoming this. There's a natural flow within our bodies of sense of wonder. It's like, how am I becoming that? And it's a flow that runs from a different direction. I would call it more feminine than the masculine. It awakens that somatic emotional response, and then you start having a greater capacity to receive. When you start feeling the capacity to receive, your emotions start to build up in a way that is empowered, because you start feeling the being met at a visceral level. You start feeling the being accepted at a visceral level. You start feeling the sensuality of your creation running through your body. And when we start doing that, when we enliven, it actually enhances our capacity to be in relation with the cosmic and to be in the co-creation of the wisdom that's flowing through. So we've cut down the static that was running from the got to. We've slowed down and we start weaving with the fabric of what's being facilitated for us right now through the planetary influences, through the energy that's coming in, through this ascensionary facilitation that's really happening on this planet right now. I don't think the planet's being destroyed. I think we're going through an ascensionary revolution. And it's wonderful. But we have to go through the birthing process, and it's scary and it's hard, and we're going to feel things. And even when we aspire to opening up our hearts and to receiving in ways that haven't before, a big part of us is going to be scared because we don't know what it looks like. What is this coming in? Can I hold it? Is it too much? Am I doing it right? And just allow those to go through. Allow all that to come up and rise out. Not be in reaction mode with it, but be in the tango with it. And just know, again, like I said earlier, that you are equipped, you were built for this time, and your whole life is changing in such beautiful ways.
And of course, the key is to seek pleasure, but not for pleasure's sake. You know, that there's a difference between pleasure and pain, and that when we're feeling safe and insecure, we're in pain. And so, well, okay, so find what is pleasurable about one's body. So, you know, presumably because you live in Hawaii, when you're walking by the sea, whether it's a calm day or a turbulent day, you're drinking in all of that wonderful energy. And because of your sensitivity, you're feeling the water spirits talk to you and look after you, because if we speak to them, then they will speak back. Yeah, so seeking the pleasure body.
Well, it's interesting being on the island also. Well, yesterday I was actually getting a cranial session through an amazing healer here on the island. And as I was laying on the table, I kept hearing, there's pleasure in the pain. There's beauty in the pain. Allow it to go through and get to the pleasure. But this is what's being birthed. Now, being on this island, yes, it would seem we're very insulated, and we are in so many ways so blessed. But there's also the challenges of opening and expansion that a place like this provides that is way outside the comfort zone. So, you know, we hear a lot of people say, you know, people come to the island, but they get kicked out right away. Or people come to the island and they go through this metamorphosis of an expansion, but it can be hellish to allow that much vulnerability, that much tenderness, that much rawness to run through us. And so it's like a different war that we're fighting, but it's against ourselves and the old paradigm and the way that we've been wired through social conditioning. And it's an expansion that's happening, but it can be quite the initiation.
Yeah, I'm sure. Sure. But how wonderful to be disciplined by Mother Nature than by some other ferocious force sitting in an office or a building in Washington.
I agree. Yeah, 1000%.
Or any of the people that happen to be in our lives who like to provide us with the perception that they hold us in great criticism or disdain. Now, I'd much rather be taught what to do by Mother Nature, even if she is being hard. You know, all the experiences that I've had in Hawaii, of all the areas that I visited in the world, I always felt so loved and caressed and held and massaged by her. And you know, because of that extraordinary magic that's around.
I have to share this. It's been so beautiful for me, Stewart. So it's I always used to refer to Kauai as Mama Kauai because it's this embrace, this love, it's the holding. And she was that for me for quite a while. And over the last 6 to 8 months, she's been speaking to me again. And I've had amazing conversations with, like, the synchronicities that show up are just magical. But to keep it short, I'm not your mother anymore. I am a sexual, sensual being. And you should hold me as such. You don't need a mother anymore. We're done playing that. What are you ready to awaken to? And it happened again this week, and I was driving up to the North Shore of Kauai, and I looked at her as I was driving, and I went into this trance, and she was doing this sensual hula dance for me and inviting me in. And I heard her say, let me dance for you. Let me make love to you. Receive me. Devote yourself to me. Claim me. And I think that we're all being invited into the sensuality, into what are we choosing to claim now? And that's where the masculine comes in and gets to merge with the feminine and do that beautiful tango together and co-create what's possible now. It's so awakening right now, Stewart. It's so awakening for all of us. And I had the privilege of having that psychic experience and that dance over. But I know what's happening here is happening in other places as well. So I'm excited, and I'm with y'all. It's like I'm here we're doing this together.
So instead of the mother now becomes the lover. So that's really interesting. Wow. So anybody, I was just about to say, does anybody have a question for dear John? Because we are drawing through the last 7 or 8 minutes of our conversation. How do you feel compassion for the group of people that are pushing us because of their own agenda? I suppose we're talking about Al-Anon and, all of those unusual people. QAnon, rather, not Al-Anon.
Yeah, QAnon. Really look at why. Why are they pushing the agenda? It's like, I wonder why they're pushing an agenda. First, we can separate, because if we're charged and we think that we have to fight against it and prove them wrong, we're at war. And if someone can prove this to me, ever in the history of all of humanity, there's never been a war that's ended a war. So we need to separate. We need to push back, not be manipulated even by the response, because even those entities want to take your energy in a particular direction. So we start feeding it. It's like, oh, wait, hold on a second. I'm going to bring myself back. I wonder why they feel they have to control or manipulate or direct the conversation, if you will. I wonder why that's happening. And stepping back and just being curious. And I can tell you all aspects are showing up for different reasons. But at the root, Stewart, at the root, I so believe, without any shadow of a doubt, that it's all leading us back to love. And how one person can receive love compared to another is not for us to judge. It's an individual soul journey, and that's a whole different conversation. But to step back and understand that this may be right for someone else, even though it may not be right for me. It's like, okay, I don't have to engage. And the more people that choose not to engage, the more that your wave of consciousness forms the bigger wave that's going to create the change that's available. But if we condemn it, it's going to condemn us right back. Yeah. We're regurgitating the energy that's not serving us anymore. So stepping back and knowing, well, they're in their version of love that may be confused from my version of it. And if they're suffering, it's like, wow, they're suffering through that. They're fighting. Look how they're draining their energy. Look how they're fighting to get something that's not theirs. We can have compassion because we've done that somehow in our lives as well. Where were we trying to stand up, be seen, be heard? Where were we misunderstood? Where did we try to manipulate a situation to try to earn love? Single one of us has done it. And so when we can relate, have compassion, and choose not to engage because it's not in alignment with us, then you got your power back, and you're actually empowering a different directive because you're bringing forward a higher vibrational possibility that doesn't have to go into as much suffering, if you will. But again, we can't judge it.
I'm reminded of Gandhi's statement, which of course have brought the presupposition of non-violent peaceful protests. Be the change you want to see. So not be the change as the impassioned warrior, but be the change as the impassioned peacemaker. And yet we all know that peacemakers can really piss people off.
Yeah.
And then he steps in by saying, well, first they laugh at you. No, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. The presupposition, of course, is that you don't necessarily retaliate when they fight, because automatically the warring party is seen to be the victim rather than the victor, because you don't respond to the aggression. That's really fascinating. I don't know if you've ever had experiences of that in growing up, where I used to excite or entice a tremendous amount of disapprobation from the world, it seemed. And particularly in relation to peers. So it started off with bullying, then it started off with a lot of sexual prejudice and violence, and then it sort of moved from bullying into mugging, and it went on and on and on and on and on. And it suddenly I began to realize in my early 20s that I was actually in deep denial of the energy that was presenting itself to me, because it seemed repellent, abhorrent, and just simply not what I was all about. It lacked any grace whatsoever. But really what I was doing is judging and criticizing, which was antagonizing the energy. I was doing it completely unconsciously. But as soon as I moved into the stillness of my own center and realized that I actually didn't need to retaliate, I didn't need to reciprocate, I just simply needed to stay where I was, automatically all of the unconscious manifestation of bullying stopped. I don't know if you witnessed that at all when you were growing up, if you ever felt in a situation where you were being victimized or bullied or.
Absolutely. The bullying, definitely growing up, and we grew up on a lower level class in New York. And so there was a lot of prejudice. There was a lot of gang activity. There was a lot of bullying and manipulation, and a lot of separation, and fear led it, because I was taught fear by my parents and by the family. So fear is what took hold, and that had to shift. But it shifted not by fighting the bully or all that, but just holding in a space that the pain that they were caught, that they could potentially cause you physically, was actually far less than the psychological pain and the psychic pain that we're receiving on a daily basis. And so relaxing into that and allowing the nervous system to attune beyond the fear, and to even walk through the dark aspects of it and everything that would take us down, it made it not be quite as scary, even though in different circumstances there was a lot of victimization going on. But there was a change of attitude that allowed for calmness to come in, and then actually allowed for emerging, because wherever I had fear, I was causing separation of those who I feared. And so they felt like there was something strange coming in. I was running away from something strange, and there was actually a merging that was happening with the bullying, where we started actually having communication and friendships. And it's like, oh, here comes John. It's like nobody's picking on John, right? It was just like, it's like all of a sudden there's this camaraderie based on an expression. I acknowledge you for who you are. I choose not to be afraid of you, or I choose to educate myself, if you will, on more about what you're about. And it's through that education, through that intimacy, that the walls collapse, that we build these personas on, that cause all of this confusion between all these people. So right now, even the personas are falling off. The political personas, the consumerism personas, the media personas, they're all getting revealed for those masks, and the authenticity that's being required in the younger generation. We all feel it. They call for authenticity. They can spot BS from a mile away. But how amazing that is being demanded and felt through this empathic ability. Like, hey, something ain't right with this camel ride. And that we're calling it out instead of ignoring it, right?
I love it. That's an interesting image coming in. There ain't something right with this camel ride, I'm telling you. That's really really fascinating. You know, it's interesting that the construct of personae was brought about initially by Carl Jung when he actually saw it as being a negative or derogatory function of the human psyche, the mask, the social mask. Whereas originally it was considered to be a thing of great purity, going all the way back into Greek, Roman theatre, because it was considered to be, you know, the mask that they spoke through had this mouthpiece, which was persona. And persona means through sound. So the soul or the spirit of the individual was revealed through sound. They used mask because it meant you could just have a few actors and lots of characters. You see, cheap labor. It's rather like that today. And of course, what the mask did was to amplify in the open air. So it was interesting that in 1916, it's referred to historically that Jung took that idea and used it as a pejorative, that we were just simply wearing a mask and not really seeing the real person, you know. I wonder if you had any more questions. Jennifer was talking about a video by Matt Kahn helped me realize why it was happening. Any questions rather than we are talking about Gandhi, but he was shot. So what's the problem with that? I mean, don't you realize that?
There was a story with Gandhi where there was a man that stabbed him in the crowd.
Yeah.
And they found the man, they took him into custody, and Gandhi said, don't persecute him. Don't press charges. Let him go. I'm just going to send him love.
Yes.
I'm going to bless him and send them love.
Yes.
And that person was so touched by the forgiveness. He was so touched by Gandhi's consciousness that he actually became a follower of Gandhi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So the power of our love and compassion, where we seek not to condemn because we've been taught to condemn, but rather to bring a different solution. It's so vital.
I was reminded the other day with a dear friend of a shocking story that I heard some time ago. When I say shocking, it's dramatic because it really, as this story does, it brings about where are our values? Are they expansive or are they restrictive? And the story was that, as we know in India, there is, and this is going back 40 years or 30 years ago, there is, as we know, a very strict caste system. And the lower caste are known as the untouchables. So there is this man who is quite prosperous, who is beating one of his servants, who is one of the untouchables. And he beats him with such fervor that the man dies. And immediately, in the dying of this man, the business owner is really quite shocked by what he's done because he hadn't realized the fervor of his blows, or you know, whatever the way was that he perpetrated it. And Babaji, the great avatar, the great spiritual master, was standing very close by and saw the man do this, but didn't say anything, just simply waited for the business owner to step forward and say, "Master, what do you feel I should do?" And eventually he did this. He stepped forward and Babaji said, "Do you see that cliff over there? Go and throw yourself off the cliff." And actually, the cliff edge, you could see that there was a 500-foot drop and ragged stones at the bottom. And so, of course, the outcome would be that this man would perish, that his body would be torn asunder. But because he'd listened to the master and was in this huge process of recognizing what karma was, he decided he would throw himself off the cliff, and he died. However, in the moment of death, he suddenly realized that there was this kind being standing next to him and placing their hand on the forehead. And he realized it was Babaji, and he was once more alive. So what had actually happened is, in the perpetration of immediate karmic solution, that Babaji bilocated and brought the man, resurrected the man from death into life again. So, just because, I mean, that's it on a palpable level, but just because as you were saying about the stab wound or the shooting, just because the shot perishes the life of the individual on the earth plane, they are immediately welcomed into heaven in the most glorious fashion to continue their work. And going sort of full circle with what you were sharing with us earlier about this period, this era of the empaths, or as I'm calling it, the revolution of the empaths. I believe fundamentally that Saint Germain is the cosmic Christ that we've all been looking for. We thought he would appear in the form of Maitreya, and I believe that Maitreya has actually given place for Saint Germain. But Saint Germain is not appearing in flesh, he's an ascended master. But what he's doing is signaling we, as the empaths, to become the embodied somatized consciousness of the Christos. And this has never happened before in spiritual history, according to many of the scholars within Hinduism, within Buddhism, within Judaism, and so forth. So that's quite a fascinating revolutionary thought, isn't it? That actually, by being the empaths that we wish to be, that we are, that we're literally becoming part of the breath of God that is bringing huge shifts of consciousness into the people that are before us and around us and with us, whether we're speaking or no. John, this has been so amazing. Are there any other extraordinary questions that you wish to ask, you wonderful people? Everybody's saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. What a wonderful, the end of pain. I believe it was called The End of Pain. Absolutely, Jennifer. That sounds fascinating. The end of pain and the beginning of terminal pleasure. That's what I want.
Yes. Yes to that.
I'm with you, John. I'll be there. So everybody's saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We've run over very considerably, but it's been such an exciting I just love sharing space with you. You are amazing. And you always have so many original thoughts. I love it. I love it. So whatever you're taking, please keep taking it, John. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for all of your amazing thanks. And this is beloved. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Tracy, you're such a sweetheart. Yolanda, thank you for coming through. How are you connecting to the empaths in Africa and other parts of the world? Through breath, of course. We're going to have to go, Yolanda. I'm so sorry. Okay, so bless you, bless you. You guys rock, says Hillary. Stay where you are. I'm just going to close down Facebook. See you next week, everybody. And we have the most amazing angel medium on in the form of Kyle Gray, who's just recovered from COVID. Bless him. Okay, ciao, everybody. Stay where you are, John. I don't want to lose you. Everybody.